We've been listening to former Vice President Joe Biden speaking at a campaign event in Reno, Nevada. The former vice president immediately addressed the controversy surrounding that Ukraine call. He said that President Trump has a, quote, personal political vendetta against him. As a reminder, the president pressed Ukraine to investigate the Biden family ahead of 2020. Biden defended his actions in Ukraine, calling them, quote, fully transparent. He also accused Mr. Trump of betraying the U.S. for political gain. For more, let's bring in CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. He joins me now on the phone. So, Ed, this came on a day when President Trump said from the White House this of Joe Biden and his family, characterizing them as, quote, stone cold crooked. We heard a pretty forceful response there from Joe Biden.
We did. There have been a few inflection points for the Biden campaign in recent months, and they've all had to do with responses like this to the president. This plays to Biden's benefit to some extent because it gives voters potentially a preview of what the general election could be like. And Biden, since day one, has been focused almost singularly in a big picture sense on making sure that the Democratic Party and Americans that support him overall are focused on defeating the president, because that is, after all, what Democrats have to do in order to retake the White House, and something that consistently polling shows is a top concern for Democratic primary voters. So we got heads up from his campaign a little earlier tonight that he would be doing this, essentially deviating from his standard stump speech and making these forceful arguments against the president. What he did not do yet again, however, Elaine, is answer in public, on camera, directly to voters, not through his campaign and written statements, not through in background quotes given to reporters who've written stories about this, but explain what his son was doing there in Ukraine as a board member of an energy company, whether and when he ever discussed this with his son, and why it is that Hunter Biden was able to get that position at all. Was it essentially because his last name is Biden? This is, not necessarily detrimental to Biden. It's not a central issue, although the Trump campaign and the president certainly would like it to be. But because he continues to refuse to answer questions about it and instead try to redirect the press and everybody else to the question of the president and his fitness, it's going to allow these issues to just fester. And the reporting we've done and other outlets have done continues to show that nobody really in the Biden operation has tried to get the vice president to talk about this at any length because it's sort of seen as a no-go zone. That you can talk to him about policy, about campaign strategy, you just can't get him to engage on his family. And if and when it ever happens, it'll be because he has decided it's time to talk about it. So, once again, that allows this issue to sort of linger, and questions will continue to be asked, whether they're justified or not, as to why a member of his family was able to make so much money working for an overseas company at a time when he was serving as vice president. But, this, again, one of the more forceful responses he's given to the president, who clearly remains quite focused, if not obsessed, with Biden.
And Ed, what about the framing of this here? We've heard this from others as well, that these the situation involving the president and the phone call to the Ukrainian president represents a risk, as the former vice president said, to national security. Joe Biden there said that the reason he feels that took place is because he thinks that the president does not want to run against him. What about that framing here by not just the former vice president, but other Democrats as well, as they look ahead as this impeachment inquiry moves forward?
Yeah, I mean, look, the central premise of the Biden campaign is and has been that they believe he is the best Democrat equipped to take on the president in the general election. So this was a sharper argument made by Biden tonight that, he is the guy and that he should be the one to take on the president. Certainly other Democrats in the race don't necessarily feel that way and make their own arguments about why they think they could do it. And polling shows that Democrats believe there's a handful of their current contenders who could defeat the president. But, again, this is one way for Biden at least to respond to all this by saying, well, the only reason he's talking about this is because he's terrified of running against me. We'll see if that sticks with voters. Remember, all of this is happening at a time when Biden is actually slipping back in polling in the early states and nationally behind Elizabeth Warren. And so some have sort of said, well, fine, if you want to focus on Biden, go ahead, Mr. President. But really, if you believe the current surveys, of Democrats out there who are paying attention to this race and are engaged in it, the one perhaps you should be worried about is Elizabeth Warren.
Ed, before we let you go, tell us the latest on Senator Bernie Sanders, who had to leave the campaign trail for health reasons.
Sure, and we should point out, virtually every Democratic contender is in Nevada today and was yesterday, because there was a forum hosted today by the Giffords Gun Control Group in Las Vegas a year and a day after the mass, or 2 years and a day, sorry, after the mass shooting at that concert festival, music festival there in Las Vegas. This was Biden tonight, his first trip to Reno as a presidential candidate. He was speaking at a community college there. Bernie Sanders, as we understand it, is still at a hospital in Las Vegas. He went in last night after complaining of chest pain or some issues with his discomfort, and apparently had 2 stents inserted overnight. And we're told is resting comfortably. We haven't heard anything more from his campaign about his health, which, is either a good thing. Based on the early statement this morning, the campaign said he's recovering. Several people who have been in touch with him today, including Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer tonight, tweeted that he spoke with Sanders and that he's in good spirits. And Elizabeth Warren, I believe, was among others who said that they had been in touch with Bernie, or at least had reached out to Bernie Sanders to express their concern. The campaign insists that he's in good spirits. And look, we talked to our John LaPook, our chief medical correspondent, earlier today, who said if it's just a simple stent procedure, you can rebound from that pretty quickly, and as long as you're a healthy guy otherwise, shouldn't be an issue. I asked Sanders about his health back in April during an interview about his Medicare for All plan and said straight up, is there anything in your health based on your age, he's 78, that concerns you? And he says no, and he pointed out that he's been a road runner most of his life and believes that that's helped keep him healthy. So we'll await word, hopefully tomorrow at some point, as to his health and whether he's able to even leave Nevada, because there are some medical professionals who say that after this kind of procedure, somebody really shouldn't be up and about and traveling much for up to a week, if not 2 weeks. So it could be an interesting decision here for Sanders on what exactly to do next and when to reengage.
All right. Ed O'Keefe, thank you very much for all of that. Really